Adrian Kwan owned half the city, commanded boardrooms across 3 continents, and could crush careers with a single phone call. But none of that power prepared him for what the security feed showed him at midnight. Simone Hayes, the woman who kept his empire running, standing alone in his office, clutching his coat like it was the last piece of something real, tears streaming down her face. For 2 years, she'd been his secret, his calm. The only honest thing left in a life built on calculated moves and a marriage that felt more like a prison sentence than partnership. In watching her break, Adrian finally understood. He'd already lost the only thing that mattered. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop a like, comment your city below, and stay with me until the end. This story goes places you won't expect. But the building was silent. Not the comfortable kind of silence, the hollow kind. The kind that pressed against your ears and made you aware of how alone you really were. Adrian Kwan stood at the window of his corner office on the 43rd floor, looking down at Los Angeles like it was a map he'd already memorized. The city glittered back at him, distant, indifferent, expensive. Somewhere down there, people were still awake, still moving, still pretending their lives had direction. He used to feel something when he looked at this view. Pride, maybe. Accomplishment. Now it just felt like staring at evidence. Behind him, his desk was clean. Too clean. Simone had organized it before she left, the way she always did. Pens lined up. Files stacked by priority. His schedule for tomorrow printed and placed in the exact center of the leather pad. She'd been doing that for 2 years, and he'd stopped noticing when it became automatic. He checked his watch. 11:47 p.m. Vivian wouldn't be home. She was at some charity gala in Beverly Hills, the kind of event where people paid $5,000 a plate to feel like they cared. She'd asked him to come. He'd said no. She hadn't argued. That was how their marriage worked now. 2 people moving through the same space, careful not to touch. Adrian turned back toward his desk and caught his reflection in the dark glass of the window. 41 years old, tailored suit that cost more than most people's rent. Hair starting to gray at the temples in a way his stylist said made him look distinguished. He looked tired. He looked like a man who'd won everything and couldn't figure out why it felt like losing. His phone buzzed. A notification from building security. Motion detected, executive floor, zone 4. His office. Adrian frowned. Security wasn't supposed to let anyone up after 9 unless he cleared it personally. He opened the app and pulled up the live feed. And then he stopped breathing. Simone. She was standing in the middle of his office, her back to the camera, shoulders shaking. She was holding something, his coat, the one he'd left draped over his chair. She had it pressed against her chest like she was trying to hold on to something that was already gone. And she was crying. Not the polite, controlled kind of crying people did in public. The kind that came from somewhere deep, the kind that hurt to watch. Adrian's hand tightened around his phone. He didn't think. He just moved. Unbanned. The elevator ride down felt like it took an hour. He watched the floor numbers drop, 42, 41, 40, and tried to figure out what the hell he was supposed to say when he got there. Simone Hayes had been his executive assistant for 2 years. She was 28, which made her 13 years younger than him, and brilliant in a way that didn't need to announce itself. She spoke 4 languages, remembered every detail of every meeting, and could diffuse a crisis before most people even realized there was one. She was efficient, professional, untouchable. And somewhere along the way, without either of them saying it out loud, she'd become the only person in his life who felt real. Not because of anything dramatic, not because of some big moment, just because she was there. Every morning when he walked in, every late night when everyone else had gone home. She knew how he took his coffee. She knew when to talk and when to just let him think. She knew him better than Vivian ever had, and she'd never asked for anything in return. Until now, apparently. The elevator doors opened. Adrian stepped out into the empty hallway and walked toward his office. The lights were motion-activated, flickering on as he moved. His footsteps echoed. The door was already open. He stopped just outside, watching her through the gap. Simone was sitting on the edge of his desk now, his coat still clutched in her hands. Her face was turned away, but he could see her shoulders rising and falling, trying to get control of her breathing. Her hair was loose, falling past her shoulders in dark waves. She usually wore it up, professional, contained. She looked small. Adrian pushed the door open. Simone. She turned so fast she almost dropped the coat. Her eyes went wide, red-rimmed, wet, startled. For a second, she just stared at him like he was the last person she'd expected to see, which was stupid because it was his office, his building, his whole goddamn life. Adrian. Her voice cracked on his name. She stood up quickly, smoothing down her skirt like that would somehow make this less awkward. I thought you'd gone home. I was upstairs. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Security flagged movement. I saw the feed. Her face went pale. You were watching? I wasn't watching. I got an alert. He kept his voice even, but his chest felt tight. What are you doing here? She looked down at the coat in her hands like she'd just realized she was holding it. I left my phone. I came back to get it and She stopped, swallowed. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Don't. She looked up at him. Don't apologize, Adrian said. Just tell me what's wrong. Simone stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed, but it came out broken. You really want to know? I wouldn't have asked if I didn't. Okay. She set the coat down on the desk, carefully, like it was fragile. I'm tired, Adrian. I'm tired of pretending this is fine. I'm tired of watching you walk into this office every morning like you're going to war. I'm tired of listening to you talk about your marriage like it's a prison sentence you're serving for a crime you didn't commit. And I'm tired of being the person you come to when you need to feel like you're still human, because I can't keep doing this. The words came out fast, like she'd been holding them in for too long and couldn't stop once they started. Adrian didn't move. Keep doing what? This. She gestured between them, her hand shaking. Whatever this is, I can't keep being the person who makes you feel better and then goes home and pretends I don't exist outside these walls. Simone, I'm in love with you. The silence that followed was so heavy Adrian could feel it pressing against his ribs. Simone's eyes filled with tears again, but she didn't look away. I'm in love with you, and I know that's not fair. I know you're married. I know you have a life and a reputation and 100 reasons why this can't happen, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel this. I can't keep showing up here every day and acting like it doesn't kill me to watch you go home to someone else. Adrian felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. How long? How long what? How long have you... He couldn't finish the sentence. She gave him a sad, broken smile. Since the first time you stayed late to talk to me about something that had nothing to do with work. Since the first time you asked me how I was doing and actually waited for an answer. Since the first time you looked at me like I was more than just the person who scheduled your meetings. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. I tried to stop. I really did. But you made it impossible. Adrian opened his mouth, then closed it. What the hell was he supposed to say to that? I'm quitting, Simone said quietly. That got his attention. What? I'm putting in my notice. 2 weeks, if that's okay. I'll help you find a replacement. I'll train them. I'll make sure the transition is smooth, but I can't stay. Her voice wavered. I thought I could. I thought I could just keep my head down and do my job and pretend this didn't matter. But I can't watch you anymore, Adrian. I can't watch you destroy yourself for a life you don't even want. You don't know what I want, don't I? She looked at him, and there was something fierce in her expression now, something that cut through the sadness. You complain about Vivian every other week. You talk about your marriage like it's a business arrangement. You stay late at the office because you'd rather be here than go home. And every time you talk about your life, you sound like a man who's drowning. She took a shaky breath. I know what you want, Adrian. You want out. You've wanted out for years. You're just too afraid to do anything about it. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Because she was right. He was afraid. Adrian Kwan, the man who'd built a real estate empire from nothing, who'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching, who could walk into a boardroom and make grown men sweat, he was terrified of his own life. It's not that simple, he said, and his voice came out rougher than he meant it to. It never is. Simone picked up her bag from where she'd left it by the desk. I'll email you my formal resignation in the morning. I'm sorry, Adrian, for all of this, for making it complicated. She started toward the door. Adrian moved without thinking. He reached out and caught her wrist gently, just enough to stop her. Wait. She froze. didn't turn around. You didn't make it complicated, Adrian said. It was already complicated, I just didn't want to admit it. Simone turned slowly, and the look on her face, hope and hurt tangled together, made something crack open inside him. I don't know how to fix this, he said. I don't know how to fix any of this. But I need you to know. He stopped, took a breath. You're not just part of my world, Simone. You are my world. The only real part of it. Her breath hitched. Adrian, I'm married to a woman I don't love. I live in a house that feels like a museum. I go to parties where everyone smiles and no one says anything true. And the only time I feel like I can breathe is when I'm here, with you. He let go of her wrist but didn't step back. So no, you didn't make this complicated. You made it bearable. Simone stared at him, tears streaming down her face now, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then she closed the distance between them and kissed him. It wasn't careful. It wasn't polite. It was desperate and messy, and 2 years of something unspoken finally breaking through the surface. Adrian kissed her back, his hands coming up to frame her face, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt something other than numb. When they finally broke apart, Simone was shaking. What are we doing? I don't know, Adrian said honestly, but I'm tired of pretending. She laughed, but it sounded fragile. You realize this is insane, right? You're married. I'm your assistant. I know. He brushed a tear off her cheek with his thumb. I know what this looks like. I know what it costs, but I can't keep lying to myself. Not about this. Simone looked up at him, searching his face like she was trying to decide if he meant it. What about Vivian? And just like that, reality came crashing back. Adrian stepped back, running a hand through his hair. I don't know. That's not an answer. I know it's not. He turned away, pacing toward the window. Vivian and our marriage was never about love. It was about strategy. Her father helped me build this company. I needed his backing. She needed a respectable husband. It made sense at the time. And now it's a cage. He stared out at the city. But it's not just my cage. It's hers too, and her family's, and every investor and board member who thinks a stable marriage means a stable company. He turned back to face her. If I leave her, it's not just a divorce. It's a war. Simone wrapped her arms around herself. So what are you saying? That we can't do this? I'm saying it's not going to be clean or easy or quick. Adrian crossed the room and stood in front of her again. But if you're asking me if I want you, if I'm willing to fight for this, then yes, I am. She searched his eyes. You mean that? I mean it. For a moment, Simone looked like she might believe him. Then her expression shifted and she shook her head. Talk is easy, Adrian. You've been complaining about your marriage for 2 years, and you've never done anything about it. What makes this different? Because you're different. That's not enough. Her voice was quiet but firm. I'm not going to be the person you turn to when you're miserable and then go back to pretending I don't exist when it gets hard. I'm not going to be your secret. I'm not asking you to be. Aren't you? She looked at him, and there was something raw in her expression. Because right now, that's exactly what this is. A secret. Something that happens behind closed doors when no one's watching. Adrian felt the truth of that settle in his chest like a stone. What do you want me to do? I want you to choose. Simone's voice broke on the last word. Not someday, not when it's convenient, now. It's not that simple. It is that simple. She stepped closer, and the look in her eyes was fierce. Either you want me or you don't. Either you're willing to walk away from a marriage that's killing you or you're not, but I'm not going to wait around while you figure it out. Adrian stared at her, and for the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him. Not just fear, not just guilt, something sharper, something that felt almost like courage. Okay, he said. Simone blinked. Okay? Okay. He reached out and took her hand. I'll do it. I'll end it. She looked at him like she was afraid to hope. When? I don't know. Soon. I need to talk to her. I need to figure out how to... Adrian. She pulled her hand back. That's not an answer. What do you want me to say? That I'll do it tonight? That I'll walk into my house and blow up my entire life without a plan? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration bleeding into his voice. I'm trying, Simone. I'm trying to do this the right way. There is no right way. Her voice was soft, but it cut through him. There's just doing it or not doing it. She picked up her bag again and slung it over her shoulder. Where are you going? Home. She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at him. I meant what I said, Adrian. I'm putting in my notice. If you want me to stay, if you want us to be real, then prove it. Don't just tell me you'll do it. Actually do it. And then she was gone. Adrian stood alone in his office, staring at the empty doorway, and felt the weight of her words settle over him like a sentence. He didn't go home that night. Instead, he sat at his desk and stared at his phone, thinking about all the ways his life was about to implode. Vivian wasn't going to make this easy. She never did. Their marriage had always been transactional, but that didn't mean she'd let him walk away without a fight. She had too much to lose: her reputation, her family's approval, the image they'd carefully built over the years, the power couple, the perfect partnership. And then there was her father. Min Seok Park was this kind of man who built empires and crushed anyone who got in his way. He'd bankrolled Adrian's company in the early days, when no one else would take the risk. He'd opened doors that would have stayed locked otherwise. And in return, Adrian had married his daughter and played the role of the dutiful son-in-law. If Adrian walked away now, Min Seok wouldn't just let it go. He'd retaliate. He'd pull his backing. He'd turn every connection Adrian had ever made through him into an enemy. It would be a war. But sitting there in the dark, staring at the empty space where Simone had been standing, Adrian realized something. He was already at war. He'd been at war for years. With himself. With the life he'd built. With the choices he'd made because they were safe instead of honest. And he was tired of losing. When Adrian finally left the office, the sun was starting to rise. The city looked different in the early morning light, softer, quieter, almost gentle. He drove home on autopilot, his mind still turning over everything Simone had said. Either you want me or you don't. He did. That was the problem. He wanted her more than he'd wanted anything in a long time, and that terrified him. Because wanting something meant risking it, losing it, watching it fall apart the way everything else in his life had. Adrian pulled into the driveway of his house, a sprawling estate in the hills, all glass and steel and empty rooms, and sat in the car for a long moment before going inside. Vivian's car was in the garage. She was home. He found her in the kitchen, still in last night's gown, a glass of wine in her hand, even though it was barely 6 in the morning. She looked up when he walked in, her expression unreadable. You didn't come home last night, she said. It wasn't a question. I was at the office. Of course you were. She took a sip of her wine. You're always at the office. Adrian leaned against the counter, too tired to do this dance. We need to talk. Vivian raised an eyebrow. About what? About us. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. There is no us, Adrian. There hasn't been for a long time. I know. That seemed to surprise her. She set down her glass and looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. So what are you saying? I'm saying this isn't working. It hasn't been working, and I think we both know it. Vivian crossed her arms. And you're just now figuring this out? No. Adrian met her gaze. I've known for a while. I just didn't know what to do about it. And now you do? He hesitated. I think so. Vivian studied him for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. There's someone else. It wasn't a question. Adrian didn't answer. I knew it, Vivian said, and her voice was cold. I knew there was something. You've been different, distracted. I just didn't know who. Vivian, who is she? Adrian stayed silent. Tell me. Her voice was sharp now, cutting. Who is she? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Is it someone from the office? Adrian's silence was answer enough. Vivian laughed, but it sounded bitter. Of course it is. How predictable. She picked up her wine glass again and drained it. Let me guess. Young? Beautiful? Impressed by your success? Don't. Don't what? Don't point out that you're having a midlife crisis like every other man who's bored with his life? She slammed the glass down on the counter hard enough that Adrian was surprised it didn't shatter. You think you're the first person to get tired of this? To want something different? You're not special, Adrian. You're just selfish. Maybe I am, Adrian said quietly. But that doesn't change the fact that this isn't working. For either of us. Vivian stared at him, and for a moment he thought she might argue. Might fight. Might do something other than stand there looking at him like he was a stranger. But then she just shook her head. Fine. Adrian blinked. Fine? Fine. She walked past him toward the door, then stopped and looked back. But don't think this is going to be easy, Adrian. You want out? You'll get out. But it's going to cost you everything. And then she was gone. Adrian stood alone in the kitchen, listening to her footsteps echo through the empty house, and felt the first real crack in the foundation of his life. Over the next week, Vivian made good on her promise. She didn't yell, she didn't throw things, she didn't make dramatic scenes. She just quietly, methodically began to dismantle his life. First, she called her father. Adrian didn't know what she told him, but within 2 days, Min Seok Park requested a meeting. Not at the office. At his estate in Bel Air, the kind of place that made Adrian's house look modest. Adrian went because he didn't have a choice. Min Seok was waiting for him in his study, a room lined with leather-bound books and expensive art. He was in his 70s, but still sharp, still intimidating, still the kind of man who could make you feel like you were 15 years old and being called into the principal's office. Sit, Min Seok said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Adrian sat. For a long moment, Min Seok just looked at him, his expression unreadable. Then he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. My daughter tells me you want a divorce. Yes. Why? Adrian met his gaze. Because our marriage isn't real. It never was. And whose fault is that? Both of ours. Min Seok nodded slowly. At least you're honest. He picked up a pen and tapped it against the desk. Do you know what I gave up to back you, Adrian? The risks I took? The favors I called in? I do. Then you understand that walking away isn't just about you and Vivian. It's about me, about my family, about the reputation we've built together. I understand that. Do you? Min Seok's voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. Because if you go through with this, you're not just divorcing my daughter. You're ending our alliance, and I will make sure you regret it. Adrian felt the threat settle over him like a weight, but he didn't look away. I'm not afraid of you. Min Seok raised an eyebrow. You should be. Maybe. Adrian leaned forward. But I'm more afraid of spending the rest of my life pretending, of waking up every day in a life that doesn't belong to me, of watching the one real thing I have slip away because I was too afraid to fight for it. Min Seok studied him for a long moment. Then, to Adrian's surprise, he smiled. There's the man I backed, the one who wasn't afraid to take risks. Adrian frowned. What? I knew this marriage was a mistake from the beginning, Min Seok said. But Vivian wanted it. She wanted the image, the status. And I wanted her to be happy. He set down his pen. But she's not happy. Neither are you, and pretending otherwise is a waste of everyone's time. Adrian stared at him, not sure he'd heard correctly. I'm saying I won't stand in your way. Min Seok opened a drawer and pulled out an envelope. He slid it across the desk. Divorce papers. Already signed by Vivian. All you have to do is add your signature. Adrian picked up the envelope, his hands shaking slightly. Why? Because you're right. Min Seok leaned back in his chair. This alliance cost you your life. And I'm not in the business of destroying men I respect. Adrian looked down at the envelope, and for the first time in weeks he felt like he could breathe. Thank you, he said quietly. Min Seok nodded. Don't waste it. Adrian went straight to the office. It was late afternoon and the building was still busy, people moving through the halls like everything was normal, like his entire world hadn't just shifted on its axis. He took the elevator up to his floor and walked into his office. Simone was at her desk, typing something on her laptop. She looked up when he walked in, and the expression on her face, carefully neutral, professionally distant, hit him harder than he expected. Adrian. She stood up. I wasn't expecting you back today. I need to talk to you. She glanced around at the open office space behind him. Maybe we should... Now, Simone. She hesitated, then followed him into his office and closed the door. Adrian set the envelope down on the desk between them. Simone looked at it, then at him. What's that? Divorce papers. Her eyes went wide. Adrian, signed, finalized, done. He stepped closer. You said I needed to prove it, that I needed to actually do it, not just talk about it. So I did. Simone stared at the envelope like it might explode. When? Today. I met with Vivian's father. He gave me these. Adrian picked up the envelope and held it out to her. It's over, Simone. The marriage, the pretending, all of it. She took the envelope with trembling hands and opened it, scanning the pages inside. When she looked up at him, her eyes were filled with tears. You really did it. I told you I would. I know, but She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to hold back a sob. I didn't think you actually... Adrian crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. Simone broke. She cried into his chest, her whole body shaking, and Adrian just held her, his hand in her hair, his own throat tight. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm sorry it took me so long. I'm sorry I made you wait. I'm sorry for all of it. She pulled back just enough to look up at him, her face wet. Don't apologize, just don't let me go. I won't. Promise me. I promise. She kissed him then, hard and desperate and full of 2 years of wanting, and Adrian kissed her back like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to the ground. When they finally broke apart, Simone was smiling through her tears. What happens now? I don't know, Adrian said honestly, but I know I'm not doing it alone. She laughed, and it sounded like relief. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. Adrian pulled her close again, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The city glittered outside the window, vast and indifferent and full of possibility. And for once, Adrian wasn't afraid of it. But freedom, as it turned out, had a price tag neither of them had calculated. The news broke 3 days later. Adrian was in a meeting with investors when his phone started buzzing non-stop. He ignored it at first. Meetings like this required focus, and the men sitting across from him controlled enough capital to make or break his next development project. But the buzzing didn't stop. Text after text, call after call. Something was wrong. He excused himself and stepped into the hallway. 12 missed calls, 37 texts, all from people who shouldn't have been contacting him in the middle of the day. He opened the first message from his publicist. Call me now. We have a situation. Adrian's stomach dropped. He dialed her number. She picked up before the first ring finished. Have you seen it? Her voice was tight, professional panic barely contained. Seen what? Check your email. I'm sending you a link. Adrian pulled his phone away from his ear and opened his inbox. The link was already there, sent 30 seconds ago. He clicked it. The page loaded and his vision blurred at the edges. It was a gossip site. One of the big ones, the kind that celebrity lawyers spent millions trying to keep stories off of. The headline was in bold red letters. Real estate mogul, Adrian Kwan leaves wife for young assistant. Exclusive photos inside. Below it were photos. Not grainy paparazzi shots, clear, deliberate images that could only have come from someone with access. Adrian and Simone in his office. Through the window, him holding her crying, the kiss. Someone had been watching them. Adrian? His publicist's voice cut through the ringing in his ears. Are you there? How did they get these? I don't know, but it doesn't matter right now. What matters is damage control. I need you to give me a statement, something I can... No? Excuse me? I'm not giving a statement. Adrian's voice was flat. Not yet. Adrian, you don't understand. This is already everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, business journals. If you don't get ahead of this, I said not yet. He hung up. His hands were shaking. Adrian stared at the photos on his screen, at the evidence of something private turned into public spectacle, and felt rage so sharp it cut through the shock. Someone had done this on purpose. Someone had watched them, waited for the right moment, and then pulled the trigger. And he knew exactly who. He dialed Vivian's number. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. Damn it! Adrian shoved his phone into his pocket and went back into the meeting. He apologized, made an excuse about an emergency, and left before anyone could ask questions. The looks on their faces told him they'd already seen the story. Everyone had. By the time he got back to his office, the hallway outside was full of people pretending not to stare. assistants who suddenly had urgent business near his door, junior executives who happened to be passing by, all of them glancing at him with barely concealed curiosity. Adrian ignored them and walked straight to Simone's desk. She wasn't there. "Where is she?" he asked one of the other assistants, a woman named Carla, who'd worked on the floor for years. Carla looked uncomfortable. "She left about an hour ago. She said she wasn't feeling well." Adrian pulled out his phone and texted Simone. "Where are you?" No response. He tried calling. It went to voicemail. A cold knot formed in his chest. "Sir?" Carla was still standing there, looking worried. "Is everything okay?" "No," Adrian said honestly. "It's not." He went into his office and closed the door. The view from his window looked the same as always, Los Angeles sprawling out below him, indifferent to the wreckage of his life. But something felt different now. Exposed. Like the glass wasn't protection anymore, just a barrier keeping him from falling. His phone rang. Not Simone. His lawyer. "I saw the story," David Chen said without preamble. "We need to talk." "About what?" "The divorce is already finalized." "The divorce is finalized on paper, but this—" David paused. "This is going to get messy, Adrian. Vivian's team is already making moves. They're claiming the photos prove infidelity, that you violated the terms of the prenup." "What terms?" "We agreed to a clean split." "You agreed to a split before this went public. Now that there's evidence of an affair—" "It wasn't an affair. The divorce papers were signed before anything happened." "I know that. You know that. But that's not the story people are reading, and Vivian's lawyers are very good at controlling narratives." David's voice softened slightly. "Look, I'm going to do everything I can, but you need to prepare yourself. This is going to get worse before it gets better." "How much worse?" "Depends on what Vivian wants." Adrian closed his eyes. "What does she want?" "I don't know yet, but whatever it is, it's going to be expensive." They talked for another 10 minutes. Legal strategy, potential lawsuits, reputation management, but Adrian barely heard any of it. All he could think about was Simone. Where she was. If she'd seen the story, if she blamed him for it. When he finally hung up, he tried calling her again. Still nothing. Adrian grabbed his keys and left. The drive to Simone's apartment took 20 minutes in traffic that felt like punishment. Every red light, every slow-moving car, every second he wasn't moving felt like time wasted. He parked in front of her building, a modest complex in Silver Lake, the kind of place where artists and young professionals lived before they could afford something better, and took the stairs 2 at a time to the 3rd floor. He knocked on her door. No answer. "Simone?" He knocked again, harder. "I know you're in there. Open the door." Silence. "Simone, please." The door finally opened, but only a crack. Simone stood on the other side, still in her work clothes, her face pale and her eyes red. She looked like she'd been crying for hours. "You saw it," Adrian said. "Everyone saw it." Her voice was hoarse. "My phone hasn't stopped ringing since it went live. Reporters, bloggers, people I went to college with who haven't talked to me in years. Everyone wants to know if it's true. If I'm the woman who destroyed Adrian Kwan's marriage." "You didn't destroy anything. Tell that to the internet." She started to close the door. Adrian put his hand against it. "Don't shut me out." "Why not? That's what you should be doing right now. Shutting me out. Protecting yourself. Putting distance between us before this gets any worse." "I'm not doing that." "You should." Simone's voice broke. "You should call your publicist and tell her I was just an employee. That the photos are misleading, that nothing happened. You should throw me under the bus and save yourself, because that's what anyone with half a brain would do." "I don't care what anyone with half a brain would do." "Adrian, I don't care." He pushed the door open wider and stepped inside, forcing her to back up. "I don't care what the internet thinks. I don't care what the reporters write. I don't care about any of it. The only thing I care about is you." Simone stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "This is exactly what I was afraid of." "What?" "This. The fallout. The headlines. The way people are going to look at me now. At us." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I knew it was going to be hard. I knew people would judge. But I didn't think—" Her voice cracked. "I didn't think they'd make me into a villain." Adrian crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. She resisted for half a second, then collapsed against him, sobbing into his chest. "You're not a villain," he said quietly. "You're the bravest person I know." "I don't feel brave. I feel like I ruined your life." "You didn't ruin anything. You saved it." She pulled back just enough to look up at him. "How can you say that? Your reputation is—" "My reputation was built on a lie." Adrian brushed a tear off her cheek. "A marriage that wasn't real. A life that wasn't mine. If losing that is what it takes to have something honest, then I'll lose it. You say that now, but when the lawsuits start, let them come." "Adrian, I mean it." He cupped her face in his hands. "I'm not walking away from this. From you. I don't care what it costs." Simone searched his eyes, and for a moment he thought she might believe him. Then she shook her head. "You don't know what you're saying. You're angry right now. You're reacting. But when you calm down and really think about what this means—" "I have thought about it. I've been thinking about it for 2 years." Adrian's voice was steady. "And I'm done pretending. I'm done living a life that makes sense to everyone else but feels like dying to me. So if that means losing everything, then fine, I'll lose it." Simone pressed her forehead against his chest. "I'm scared." "Me too." "What if it doesn't work? What if we go through all of this and it falls apart anyway? Then at least we'll know we tried." She laughed, but it came out watery. "That's not very comforting." "I'm not very good at comforting." "You're better than you think." She pulled back and wiped at her eyes. "I need to tell you something." Adrian felt his chest tighten. "What?" "I got a call this morning, before the story broke, from a reporter." "What kind of reporter?" "The kind who wanted to ask me questions about my relationship with you, about how long it had been going on, about whether I knew you were married." She took a shaky breath. "They knew things, Adrian, details that shouldn't have been public, like they'd been following us for weeks." Adrian's hands curled into fists. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing." I hung up. But then the story came out a few hours later and I realized someone set this up. Someone wanted this to happen. "Vivian." "Maybe. Or someone working for her." Simone looked up at him. "Adrian, if they've been watching us this whole time, what else do they have?" It was a good question, one Adrian didn't have an answer to. "I don't know," he said, "but I'm going to find out." Adrian made some calls that night, quiet calls to people who knew how to find information that wasn't supposed to be found. By morning, he had a name. The photographer who'd sold the images to the gossip site was a freelancer named Marcus Ito. He specialized in high-profile subjects, celebrities, politicians, anyone whose private life could be turned into a paycheck. And according to Adrian's contact, Marcus had been hired 3 weeks ago by an anonymous client. 3 weeks. Right around the time Adrian and Vivian had their conversation in the kitchen, Adrian sat in his office, staring at Marcus Ito's portfolio on his laptop, and felt cold certainty settle in his chest. Vivian had known, or at least suspected, and instead of confronting him directly, she'd hired someone to follow him, to gather evidence, to wait for the perfect moment to destroy him. The divorce papers Min Seok had given him, signed and finalized, suddenly felt less like mercy and more like strategy. Let Adrian think he'd won, let him feel safe, then pull the rug out from under him. Adrian's phone rang. Another unfamiliar number. He'd been getting them all morning, reporters mostly, trying to get a quote. He sent it to voicemail and went back to staring at the screen. A knock on his office door pulled him out of his thoughts. "Come in." Simone stepped inside and Adrian felt some of the tension in his chest ease. She looked better than she had last night, still tired, still shaken, but steady, like she'd made a decision and was sticking to it. "You came back," he said. "I thought about what you said, about not running." She closed the door behind her and crossed the room to his desk. "I'm not going to hide, Adrian. If people want to judge me, let them, but I'm not going to act like I did something wrong." "You didn't." "I know." She sat down in the chair across from him. "So what do we do now?" Adrian turned his laptop around so she could see the screen. "We figure out who's pulling the strings." Simone leaned forward, scanning the photos on Marcus Ito's website. Her expression darkened. "This is the photographer?" "Yeah, and he was hired 3 weeks ago by someone who didn't want their name attached to the job." "Vivian." "That's my guess." Adrian closed the laptop. The timing lines up. She knew something was going on, so she hired someone to prove it. But why wait until after the divorce was finalized? Why not use the photos to stop it? Because stopping it wouldn't have been enough. Adrian leaned back in his chair. This isn't about keeping me, it's about punishing me. Simone was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? I'm going to talk to her. Adrian, I know it's a bad idea. I know she's probably going to make it worse. But I need to look her in the eye and hear her say it. He stood up and grabbed his jacket. I need to know if she really hates me this much. Simone stood too. Then I'm coming with you. No. Yes. Simone, if we're doing this, if we're really going to be together, then we're doing it together. All of it. She crossed her arms. I'm not staying behind while you walk into a fight alone. Adrian looked at her, at the fierce determination in her eyes, and felt something shift in his chest. You're sure? I'm sure. Okay. He held out his hand. Then let's go. Vivian's house, the house Adrian had lived in for 5 years and never felt at home in, looked exactly the same. Modern, cold, expensive, like something out of an architecture magazine that no one actually lived in. Adrian parked in the driveway and sat there for a moment, staring at the front door. You okay? Simone asked from the passenger seat. No. Good. Me neither. That made him smile, just a little. They got out of the car and walked to the door together. Adrian didn't bother knocking. He still had a key, even though he probably shouldn't have used it. But he wasn't in the mood for polite formalities. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Vivian? Adrian called out. No answer. He walked through this foyer into the living room, Simone following close behind. Everything was exactly where it had always been. The furniture, the art, the books on the shelves that no one ever read. It was like walking through a museum of his own life. She's not here, Simone said. She's here. Adrian could feel it. She's just making us wait. Sure enough, a minute later, Vivian appeared at the top of the stairs. She was dressed impeccably. Tailored pants, silk blouse, heels that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She looked calm, composed, like she'd been expecting them. Adrian? Her eyes flicked to Simone. And you brought her. How thoughtful. We need to talk, Adrian said. Do we? Vivian descended the stairs slowly, her hand trailing along the banister. I think the photos said everything that needed to be said. You hired someone to follow me. I hired someone to document the truth. She reached the bottom of the stairs and smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Is that a crime? It's an invasion of privacy. You invaded the privacy of our marriage first. Vivian's voice was sharp. Don't act like you're the victim here, Adrian. You're the one who lied. You're the one who cheated. I didn't cheat. The divorce was finalized before... Oh, please. Vivian laughed, and it sounded cruel. Do you really think anyone cares about the timeline? You were emotionally checked out of our marriage for years. Everyone knows it. The photos just proved it. Simone stepped forward. Why are you doing this? Vivian's gaze shifted to her, cold and assessing. I'm sorry, I don't think we've been formally introduced. I'm Vivian, Adrian's wife, or ex-wife, I suppose. And you are? You know exactly who I am. Do I? Vivian tilted her head. I know you're the assistant, the one who's been sleeping with my husband, but beyond that, she shrugged. You're nobody. Vivian, Adrian said, his voice low. Don't what? Tell the truth? She turned back to him. You want to know why I did it? Because you embarrassed me. Because you made me look like a fool. Because you walked away from our marriage like it was nothing, like the 5 years we spent building a life together didn't matter. They didn't. Adrian's voice was flat. Not to you. Not really. This was never about love, Vivian. It was about image. About what our marriage looked like to everyone else. And what's wrong with that? Vivian's composure cracked, just slightly. What's wrong with caring about how things look, about maintaining a reputation, about not throwing everything away for... She gestured at Simone. For someone you barely know? I know her better than I ever knew you. The words hung in the air like a slap. Vivian's expression went cold. Get out. Gladly. Adrian turned toward the door, then stopped. But before I do, I want you to know something. Whatever you're planning, whatever move you think you're going to make next, it's not going to work. I'm not going to hide, I'm not going to apologize, and I'm not going to let you turn this into something ugly just because you're angry. It's already ugly, Adrian. I just made sure everyone could see it. Adrian looked at her one last time, this woman he'd been married to for 5 years but never really known, and felt nothing. No anger, no regret, just emptiness where something should have been. Goodbye, Vivian. They left. The drive back to the city was quiet. Simone stared out the window, her expression unreadable. Adrian kept his eyes on the road and tried to figure out what the hell they were supposed to do next. She's not going to stop, Simone said finally. I know. She's going to keep pushing, keep making this harder. I know. Simone turned to look at him. Are you sure you want to do this? Really sure? Adrian reached over and took her hand. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Even if it costs you everything? Especially if it costs me everything. He glanced at her. Because the truth is, I didn't have anything worth keeping until I had you. Simone's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. That was almost poetic. Don't get used to it. I'm terrible at this. You're better than you think. They drove back to Adrian's office, neutral ground, safer than either of their apartments, and tried to figure out their next move. But every plan they came up with felt incomplete. Every strategy had holes. The truth was, they were fighting a war they didn't know how to win, and the enemy had all the ammunition. That night, Adrian lay awake in his empty penthouse, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything he'd lost. His marriage, his reputation, his carefully constructed life. And then he thought about what he'd gained. Simone. One real thing in a world full of fake ones. It wasn't enough to fix everything. It wasn't enough to undo the damage. But it was enough to keep fighting. He picked up his phone and texted her. Are you awake? A minute later, she responded. Yeah, can't sleep. Me neither. What are you thinking about? Adrian hesitated, then typed, You. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Good things or bad things? Good things. Always good things. Liar. Adrian smiled despite himself. Okay, mostly good things. That's better. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you regret it? Any of it? The 3 dots appeared again. This time they stayed. No, not for a second. Do you? Adrian looked out at the city, at the lights that never stopped burning, at the world that kept moving no matter how many lives fell apart. No. Then we'll figure it out. Together? Together. Adrian set his phone down and closed his eyes. Tomorrow, they'd face whatever came next. The lawsuits, the headlines, the fallout. But tonight, for just a few hours, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd be okay. But believing something and living through it were 2 different things. The lawsuits started arriving by the end of the week. Not just one. 3 separate filings, all delivered within hours of each other like a coordinated attack. Vivian's legal team wasn't wasting time. Adrian sat in David Chen's office, staring at the paperwork spread across the mahogany desk, and tried to make sense of the words swimming in front of him. Breach of prenuptial agreement, emotional distress, reputational damage. Each document was thicker than the last, full of legal language that basically boiled down to one thing. Vivian wanted blood. She's claiming you violated the prenup's morality clause, David said, tapping one of the documents with his pen. Says the affair started before the divorce was finalized, which technically makes you liable for... It wasn't an affair, Adrian interrupted. Nothing physical happened until after the papers were signed. I believe you. But proving that is going to be difficult when there are photos of you 2 together before the divorce went through. David leaned back in his chair. The timeline is going to be the issue here. When did you first kiss her? When did the relationship become romantic? These are questions Vivian's lawyers are going to hammer you on in deposition. Let them. Adrian, you don't seem to understand how serious this is. If they can prove infidelity, you could lose a significant portion of your assets. We're talking tens of millions of dollars. I don't care about the money. David looked at him like he'd lost his mind. You should care about the money. This is your company we're talking about, your reputation, everything you've built. Everything I built was a lie. Adrian stood up and walked to the window. David's office overlooked Century City, all glass towers and palm trees and California sunshine that felt fake somehow. The company, the marriage, the life. All of it was built on doing what made sense instead of what was right. And you think throwing it all away is right? I think holding on to something that's killing you is worse than losing it. David was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed and took off his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. You're my client, Adrian. My job is to protect your interests, not judge your choices. But as someone who's known you for 10 years, I have to ask, are you sure about this? About her? More sure than I've ever been about anything. Even if it costs you everything? Especially then. David put his glasses back on and gathered the papers into a neat stack. Okay, then here's what we're going to do. We're going to fight this. Every single claim. We're going to prove the timeline, establish that the relationship didn't become romantic until after the divorce, and we're going to make sure Vivian's team understands that dragging this out publicly is going to hurt her just as much as it hurts you. She doesn't care about being hurt. She cares about winning. Then we'll make sure she doesn't win. David pulled out a legal pad and started writing. But I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there anything else? Anything they could find that would make this worse? Adrian thought about it. The late nights at the office, the conversations that had crossed from professional to personal, the way he'd looked at Simone long before he ever touched her, all the small betrayals that didn't have names but still counted as proof. No, he lied. Nothing else. David studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, I'll start drafting our response. In the meantime, keep your head down. Don't talk to reporters. Don't post anything on social media. And for the love of everything holy, don't be seen in public with Simone until this blows over. I'm not hiding her. I'm not asking you to hide her. I'm asking you to be smart. David's expression softened slightly. Look, I get it. You're in love. You want the world to know, but right now, the world is looking for any excuse to tear you apart. Don't give them ammunition. Adrian left David's office feeling like he was carrying concrete in his chest. The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. People got on and off at different floors, and he caught some of them glancing at him, recognition flickering across their faces. One woman whispered something to her friend. Another man pulled out his phone, probably to Google him right there. Adrian kept his eyes forward and tried to remember when his face became something strangers felt entitled to have opinions about. When he got to the parking garage, Simone was waiting by his car. She was wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low, like she was trying not to be recognized. It would have been funny if it wasn't so depressing. How'd it go? She asked. About as bad as expected. Adrian unlocked the car and they both got in. 3 lawsuits, all of them claiming I violated the prenup. Simone pulled off her sunglasses. Can they prove it? They're going to try. What does that mean for us? Adrian started the car but didn't put it in gear. He just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the concrete wall in front of them. It means we need to be careful. David says we shouldn't be seen together until this settles. And what do you say? I say David's probably right, but I don't want to do it. Simone reached over and put her hand on his. Then don't. It's not that simple. It is that simple. Either we're together or we're not. Either we're going to live our lives or we're going to hide. She squeezed his hand. I'm tired of hiding, Adrian. I've been doing it for 2 years. This is different. This isn't just about us anymore. This is about lawyers and lawsuits and I don't care. Her voice was firm. I don't care what Vivian's lawyers say. I don't care what the tabloids write. I don't care if people think I'm some homewrecker who destroyed your marriage. Because I know the truth. You know the truth. And that's all that matters. Adrian turned to look at her, and something in his chest loosened. You make it sound easy. It's not easy, but it's simple. She leaned over and kissed him, soft and quick. So what do you want to do? He thought about it, about David's advice, about the smart strategic thing to do, about all the ways this could go wrong. Then he thought about what Simone had said the night she quit, about being tired of pretending. I want to take you to dinner, Adrian said. Simone blinked. What? Dinner. A real one. Not takeout in my office, not hiding in one of our apartments. An actual restaurant where people can see us. He turned in his seat to face her fully. I want to walk in with you. I want to sit across from you and have a conversation that isn't about lawsuits or strategy or damage control. I want to do something normal. Adrian, your lawyer just told you. I know what he told me, and I'm choosing to ignore it. He started the car. So, dinner? Simone stared at him for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it was the first real smile he'd seen from her in days. Okay, dinner. They went to a small Italian place in Santa Monica, the kind of restaurant that didn't take reservations and had a line out the door on weekends. Adrian had been there once, years ago, back when he still did things like wait in line for a table. The food was good. The atmosphere was loud and chaotic, and nothing like the sterile fine dining experiences Vivian had always preferred. It was perfect. They got a table as the corner, away from the window, but still visible enough that Adrian knew they were taking a risk. The waiter recognized him. Adrian saw it in the slight widening of his eyes, the extra politeness in his voice. But to his credit, the kid didn't say anything, just took their order and disappeared. This is nice, Simone said, looking around. I haven't been to a place like this in forever. When was the last time you went out to dinner? She thought about it. I don't know, 6 months, maybe longer. I've been so busy with work that I just... She stopped. That's sad, isn't it? What is? That I can't remember the last time I did something just for fun. Just because I wanted to. She shook her head. I've been so focused on taking care of everyone else that I forgot to take care of myself. Adrian reached across the table and took her hand. Then we'll fix that. How? I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. He ran his thumb across her knuckles. You've spent 2 years making sure my life ran smoothly. It's my turn to make sure yours does. I don't need you to take care of me, Adrian. I know you don't, but I want to anyway. He paused. Is that okay? Simone looked down at their joined hands, and when she looked back up, her eyes were bright. Yeah, that's okay. The food came, and they ate and talked about nothing important. Movies they'd seen, books they'd read, places they wanted to travel. Normal conversation, the kind Adrian hadn't had in years. It was easy, natural, the kind of thing that shouldn't have felt revolutionary, but somehow did. Halfway through the meal, Adrian noticed someone at a nearby table holding up their phone, angled in their direction, taking a photo or a video, he couldn't tell which. We're being recorded, he said quietly. Simone didn't turn around. I know. I saw them a few minutes ago. Does it bother you? A little, but not as much as I thought it would. She took a sip of her wine. Let them take pictures. Let them post it online. We're not doing anything wrong. Vivian's lawyers might disagree. Vivian's lawyers can go to hell. Adrian laughed, surprised. That's the most aggressive thing I've ever heard you say. I'm tired of being polite. Polite doesn't get you anywhere. She set down her glass and looked at him directly. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about making this real, about not hiding. And I think you're right, but I also think we need to be honest about what that means. She leaned forward. If we're going to do this, if we're really going to be together, then I need you to understand something. I'm not going to be your assistant anymore. Adrian nodded. I know. You quit. I'm not talking about the job. I'm talking about the role. Her voice was steady. For 2 years, I've been the person who makes your life easier, who fixes your problems and schedules your meetings and makes sure everything runs smoothly. And I was good at it, but that's not who I want to be in this relationship. What do you want to be? Your equal. She didn't blink. Not someone who works for you, not someone who exists in your world, someone who builds a world with you. Adrian felt the weight of what she was saying settle over him. You think I see you as less than that? I think you're used to people taking care of you, and I think it's going to be hard for you to let go of that. She softened slightly. I'm not saying it's intentional. I'm just saying it's something we need to figure out. You're right. Simone looked surprised. I am? Yeah, you are. Adrian sat back in his chair. I've spent my entire adult life being the person who makes decisions, who has the answers, who's in control. And somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be anything else. He met her eyes. So if you're saying you want to be my equal, then I need to learn how to let you be that, even when it's uncomfortable. It's going to be very uncomfortable. I'm counting on it, she smiled. Good. They finished dinner and walked out into the night air. Santa Monica was alive with people. Tourists and locals mixing on the streets, street performers playing music, the smell of salt water drifting in from the ocean. Adrian took Simone's hand, and they walked without a destination, just moving through the crowd like they belonged there. It felt like freedom. They ended up at the pier, leaning against the railing and watching the waves crash against the pylons below. The Ferris wheel behind them was lit up, spinning slowly, carnival music drifting through the air. "I used to come here when I first moved to LA," Simone said. "Before I had a job or an apartment or anything, I'd just sit on the beach and try to figure out what I was doing with my life." "Did you figure it out?" "Not really. I just kept moving forward and hoped it would make sense eventually." She glanced at him. "What about you? Did you always know what you wanted?" "I thought I did. I wanted success. I wanted to prove I could build something from nothing. I wanted people to respect me." He paused. "And then I got all of that, and it turned out it wasn't enough." "What is enough?" Adrian looked at her, at the way the lights from the pier reflected in her eyes, at the wind pulling strands of hair loose from behind her ear. "This, right here, you." Simone turned to face him fully. "That's a lot of pressure to put on one person." "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just don't forget that I'm human, that I'm going to mess up and disappoint you and not always know the right thing to say." "I'm counting on that too." She laughed. "You're weird, you know that? I've been told." They stood there for a while longer, watching the ocean and not talking, just existing in the same space. Adrian felt something settle in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Peace, maybe. Or just the absence of constant noise. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again. "You should check that," Simone said. Adrian pulled out his phone and saw a dozen missed calls, all from David. A text message followed a second later. "Call me now. Emergency." Adrian's stomach dropped. "I need to make a call." He stepped away from the railing and dialed David's number. The lawyer picked up on the first ring. "Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for an hour." "I was at dinner. What's wrong?" "Vivian's team filed an emergency motion. They're claiming you're hiding assets and trying to move money offshore to avoid the settlement." "That's insane. I'm not hiding anything." "I know that. But they have bank statements, wire transfers, emails." David's voice was tight. "Adrian, someone gave them access to your financial records, and whoever it was, they had high-level clearance." Adrian felt the ground shift under him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this is coming from inside your company. Someone on your team is feeding information to Vivian's lawyers." The words hit him like a physical blow. Someone he trusted. Someone who had access to everything. Someone who'd decided Adrian's destruction was worth whatever they were getting paid. "Who?" Adrian asked, but his voice came out strangled. "I don't know yet, but we need to find out fast because if they keep leaking information, this case is going to get a lot worse before it gets better." Adrian hung up and stood there, staring at the ocean, trying to process what he'd just heard. Simone appeared at his side. "What happened?" "Someone at my company is working with Vivian, giving her lawyers access to my financial records." "Who would do that?" "I don't know." Adrian ran a hand through his hair. "But whoever it is, they're close. They have to be. This isn't something an outside person could access." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to find out who it is, and then I'm going to make sure they regret it." They drove back to the city in silence. Adrian's mind was racing, running through lists of people who had access, people who might have motive, people who could have been bought or blackmailed or convinced that betraying him was the right move. The list was shorter than it should have been. By the time they got back to Adrian's building, it was past midnight. The tower was mostly dark, just a few offices still lit on the upper floors where people were working late or couldn't sleep or had nowhere else to go. Adrian took Simone up to his office. She didn't argue. She just followed him inside and watched as he pulled up his computer and started going through access logs, trying to find the breach. "This could take all night," she said. "I know." "Then I'm staying." Adrian looked up at her. "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to. I want to." She pulled up a chair next to him. "We're in this together, remember?" "Together," Adrian repeated. They worked through the night, searching for the leak. Personnel files, financial records, security clearances, every piece of data that could have been accessed and passed along to Vivian's team. It was almost 4 in the morning when Adrian found it, A series of file transfers, all from the same IP address. Downloads of sensitive financial documents, scheduled at odd hours when most people weren't in the office. The timestamps lined up with the dates David had mentioned, and the access credentials belonged to someone Adrian had trusted completely. Richard Park, Vivian's younger brother. Adrian stared at the name on the screen and felt something cold settle in his chest. Richard had been working at Adrian's company for 3 years. He was smart, capable, good at his job. Adrian had hired him as a favor to Min Seok, but Richard had proven himself on his own merit, or at least Adrian had thought he had. Now it was obvious. Richard had been a plant from the beginning, a spy inserted into Adrian's company to keep tabs on him, to gather information, to report back to the Park family whenever they needed leverage. "It's Richard," Adrian said, his voice flat. Simone leaned over to look at the screen. "Vivian's brother?" "Yeah." "What are you going to do?" Adrian closed his laptop. "I'm going to fire him, and then I'm going to make sure everyone knows why." "Adrian? He betrayed me. He's been leaking information for weeks, maybe longer. He violated every confidentiality agreement, every piece of trust I gave him." Adrian stood up, anger flooding through him now. "I'm not letting this slide. I'm not saying you should let it slide. I'm saying you need to be smart about how you handle it." Simone stood too. "If you go in there and fire him without proof, without a plan, you're going to look like you're retaliating. It's going to make the lawsuit worse." "I have proof. Access logs aren't enough. You need to know what he gave them, what they're planning to do with it. If you fire him now, you lose your chance to find out." Adrian wanted to argue, wanted to go to Richard's office right now and throw him out personally. But Simone was right. Acting out of anger was only going to make things worse. "So, what do you suggest?" "We give him enough rope to hang himself." Simone's expression was calculating. "Keep him on. Let him think he's still safe. And we feed him false information. See what he does with it." Adrian looked at her, seeing her in a new light. "That's devious." "I learned from the best." Despite everything, Adrian smiled. "Okay, we'll do it your way." "Our way," Simone corrected. "Our way." They left the office as the sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that felt too beautiful for how exhausted Adrian was. Simone fell asleep in the car on the way back to her apartment, her head resting against the window, and Adrian drove carefully, trying not to wake her. When he pulled up in front of her building, he sat there for a moment, just watching her sleep. She looked peaceful, younger somehow, like the weight of everything they were dealing with had lifted for just a little while. He reached over and gently shook her shoulder. "We're here." Simone's eyes fluttered open. She looked confused for a second, then remembered where she was. "Sorry, I didn't mean to fall asleep." "Don't apologize. You needed it." She sat up and rubbed her eyes. "What time is it?" "Almost 6. I should let you get home. You need to sleep too." "I will." Adrian turned off the car. "Can I walk you up?" Simone looked at him, and something soft crossed her face. "Yeah, you can walk me up." They took the stairs slowly, neither of them in a rush to end the night. When they got to her door, Simone pulled out her keys but didn't use them right away. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For dinner, for not hiding, for letting me be part of this." She looked up at him. "I know it's hard for you, letting someone in, trusting someone to help carry the weight, but you're doing it, and that means something." Adrian cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, slow and gentle. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know what I'm doing half the time." "Me neither. But I know I'm not doing it alone anymore." "No," Simone said softly. "You're not." She unlocked her door and went inside, and Adrian stood in the hallway for a long moment before heading back down to his car. The drive home felt longer than it should have. The city was waking up, early morning traffic starting to build, people heading to work, the world moving forward like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Adrian's marriage was over. His company was under attack from the inside. His reputation was in shambles, and the woman he loved was risking everything to stand beside him. It should have felt like losing. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing he'd done in years. Adrian didn't go home. He drove to the office instead, running on caffeine and spite, and the kind of clarity that only came from not sleeping. By 7 in the morning, he was at his desk, going through Richard Park's employment file line by line, looking for anything he might have missed. The pattern was there once he knew what to look for. Small inconsistencies in Richard's schedule. Meetings that didn't have clear purposes. Expense reports for lunches with people who didn't exist in Adrian's contact database. It was subtle, professional, the kind of deception that took planning. Adrian's phone rang. David Chen. Did you sleep at all? The lawyer asked. No. Did you? About 2 hours. David sighed. I've been going through the documents Vivian's team filed. The financial information they have is extensive. Bank statements going back 18 months, investment portfolios, real estate holdings, everything. Richard gave them everything. It looks that way. But here's the thing, some of this information is encrypted, stored on secure servers. Your IT department should have flagged any unauthorized access immediately. Adrian leaned back in his chair. Unless someone disabled the alerts. Can Richard do that? He shouldn't be able to. But if he had help from someone in IT... Adrian stopped. Another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. Give me an hour. I'll call you back. He hung up and pulled up the IT department's access logs. It took him 20 minutes to find it, but there it was. A series of security protocol overrides, all authorized by Marcus Chen, the head of IT security. The same Marcus Chen who'd been with the company since the beginning, who Adrian had trusted completely. 2 betrayals. Not one. Adrian picked up his office phone and dialed Marcus's extension. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. He tried Marcus's cell. Same result. Damn it. He stood up and walked out of his office, heading straight for the IT department on the 38th floor. It was still early enough that most people weren't in yet, but the IT team kept odd hours. Someone would be there. The floor was quiet when he stepped off the elevator. Most of the desks were empty, computers dark. But there was a light on in Marcus's office at the far end of the room. Adrian walked toward it, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The door was open. Marcus was at his desk, staring at his computer screen. He looked up when Adrian appeared in the doorway, and something flickered across his face. Surprise. Then resignation. I was wondering when you'd figure it out, Marcus said. Adrian stepped inside and closed the door behind him. How long? How long what? How long have you been helping them? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed, but it sounded bitter. Since the beginning. Since Vivian's family approached me before you even hired me. They wanted someone inside who could keep track of you, make sure their investment was protected. The words hit Adrian like a punch. You were never my employee. You were theirs. I was both. I did good work for you. I kept your systems secure. I also reported back when they asked. Marcus turned away from his computer to face Adrian fully. It wasn't personal. It was completely personal. You don't understand. The parks don't give people choices. They make offers you can't refuse. They have leverage on everyone, and if you say no... He stopped. I have a family, Adrian. A wife. 2 kids. They threatened them. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to tell me. And you would have done what? Gone to war with the most powerful family in the city? You would have lost. I would have lost. So I made a deal. Marcus's voice cracked. I kept my head down. I did what they asked, and I told myself it was just business. Adrian felt anger and pity warring in his chest. Was Richard part of this from the start too? Richard was always part of it. He's family. He didn't need to be convinced. Marcus rubbed his face with both hands. Look, I know you're going to fire me. I know you probably hate me right now, but I need you to understand I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Not when the other option is watching your family get destroyed. Marcus looked up at him, and there was genuine pain in his eyes. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Adrian stood there for a long moment, looking at this man he'd worked with for years. This person he'd trusted with the security of his entire company, and tried to figure out what he was supposed to feel. Anger, obviously. Betrayal. But underneath that, there was something else. Understanding, maybe. Or just exhaustion. Pack your things, Adrian said finally. You have until the end of the day to clear out your desk. After that, if I see you in this building again, I'll have you arrested for corporate espionage. Marcus nodded. What about my family? What about them? Are you going to... will you... He couldn't finish the sentence. I'm not the parks. Adrian said. I don't threaten people's families. But if you ever work in this industry again, if you ever come near my company or anyone I care about, I will make sure everyone knows exactly what you did. Understand? Yes. Adrian turned and walked out. Back in his office, he called David and told him everything. The lawyer was silent for a long moment after Adrian finished. This is good, David said finally. How is any of this good? Because now we know how they got the information. And more importantly, we can prove it was obtained illegally. Corporate espionage, unauthorized access to encrypted files. This changes everything. Will it be enough to throw out the lawsuits? It should be. At minimum, it'll force Vivian's team to back off. They can't use evidence that was stolen. David paused. But Adrian, you need to understand, this is going to get ugly. When we expose Richard and Marcus, when we show how the parks operated, they're going to retaliate. Hard. Let them. I'm serious. Minsuk Park is not someone who takes humiliation lightly. If you do this, you're declaring war on his entire family. I'm already at war with them. I've been at war since I married his daughter. I just didn't realize it until now. Adrian looked out his window at the city below. File the motion. Expose everything. I'm done playing defense. He spent the rest of the morning preparing, gathering evidence, building the case, making sure every detail was documented, every access log was backed up, every piece of the puzzle was in place. By noon, the story was ready. David filed the emergency motion with the court, along with a comprehensive brief detailing the corporate espionage, the illegal access to Adrian's financial records, and the coordinated effort by the Park family to sabotage his defense. He also sent copies to 3 major business publications and 2 investigative journalists he trusted. Within 2 hours, the story broke. The headlines were brutal. Not for Adrian this time. For the Parks. Park family accused of corporate espionage in bitter divorce. Battle. Business. Empire. Built on betrayal. Inside the park. Family's spy network. Min Seok Park faces criminal investigation after leaked documents expose illegal surveillance. Adrian watched the story spread across the internet like wildfire. Twitter, LinkedIn, every business news site. His phone started ringing nonstop, reporters looking for comment, investors wanting to know what was happening, colleagues expressing either support or concern depending on their relationship with the parks. He ignored all of it. Instead, he called Simone. Have you seen the news? He asked when she picked up. Everyone's seen the news, it's everywhere. Her voice was tight. Adrian, are you okay? I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. We're winning. This doesn't feel like winning. This feels like... She paused. Like everything's about to explode. Maybe it is, but at least now people know the truth. Do they? Or do they just know a different version of the story? Simone sighed. I'm coming to the office. You don't have to. I'm coming. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up before he could argue. Adrian set his phone down and went back to watching the news coverage. A financial analyst on one channel was calling it the biggest corporate scandal of the year. A legal expert on another was speculating about potential criminal charges. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a take. None of them knew the whole story. His office door opened without a knock. Adrian turned, expecting Simone. It was Minsuk Park. Adrian hadn't seen him since the day he'd handed over the divorce papers. The older man looked the same, impeccably dressed, perfectly composed, radiating the kind of authority that came from decades of being the most powerful person in every room he entered. But there was something different in his eyes. Something cold. You made a mistake, Minsuk said, closing the door behind him. Adrian stood up. Did I? Did you really think I would let you destroy my family's reputation without consequences? Your family destroyed their own reputation. I just made sure people knew about it. Minsuk walked slowly across the office, his hands clasped behind his back like he was inspecting something that didn't quite meet his standards. Richard was following orders. Marcus was following orders. They did what they were told to protect our interests. They committed crimes. They were loyal, something you clearly don't understand. Minsuk stopped in front of Adrian's desk. I gave you everything. I backed your company when no one else would. I opened doors. I made introductions. I turned you from nobody into somebody. And this is how you repay me? You didn't do any of that for me. You did it for yourself. You needed someone to marry your daughter, someone respectable, someone who could make your family look good. Adrian's voice was steady. I was never your partner. I was your prop. And now you think you can stand on your own? Min Seok smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You're nothing without me, Adrian. You built your empire on my foundation, and I can tear it down just as easily. Try it. Min Seok's smile faded. This isn't a game. You're right. It's not. It's my life, and I'm done letting you control it. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Two men who'd once been allies, or at least pretended to be, now standing on opposite sides of a divide that couldn't be crossed. Then Min Seok turned and walked toward the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. You're going to regret this, he said without looking back. I'll make sure of it. I already regret plenty of things, but standing up to you isn't one of them. Min Seok left without another word. Adrian stood there for a moment, listening to the silence, feeling the weight of what he'd just done settle over him. He'd just made an enemy of the most powerful man in Los Angeles. The door opened again. This time it was Simone. She took one look at his face and crossed the room quickly. What happened? Min Seok was here. And he threatened me. Told me I was nothing without him. Said I'd regret going public with the espionage story. Simone's expression hardened. What did you say? I told him to try it. She stared at him. Then she laughed, sharp in surprise. You're insane. Probably. No, I'm serious. You're actually insane. Do you know what he's capable of? I don't care. You should care. Simone grabbed his arm. Adrian, Min Seok Park has connections everywhere, in politics, in business, in the media. If he wants to destroy you, he can do it. He can make sure you never work in this city again. Then I'll work somewhere else. That's not the point. The point is that I'm not afraid of him anymore. Adrian put his hands on her shoulders. For years, I lived my life according to what the Parks wanted, what they approved of, what made sense for their reputation, and it made me miserable. So if standing up to them means losing everything, then fine, I'll lose everything. But at least I'll lose it on my own terms. Simone searched his face. You really mean that? I really mean it. She kissed him, hard and desperate and full of something that felt like fear and admiration mixed together. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the stupidest. Can I be both? You definitely are. She wiped at her eyes. Okay, so what's our next move? Our next move is we wait. We see what Min Seok does, and we deal with it when it happens. That's a terrible plan. You have a better one? Simone thought about it. No, but I don't like yours. Welcome to my life. They spent the rest of the afternoon in Adrian's office, monitoring the news coverage and fielding calls from David about the legal implications of the espionage revelation. By 4 o'clock, 3 different law firms had reached out offering to represent Adrian pro bono. By 5, a criminal prosecutor had announced an investigation into the Park family's business practices. By 6, Vivian called. Adrian stared at her name on his phone screen for a long moment before answering. What do you want? To talk. Her voice was clipped. In person. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't care what you think. Meet me at the house. 1 hour. Come alone. She hung up before he could respond. Adrian looked at Simone. Vivian wants to meet. Absolutely not. I have to. No, you don't. It's a trap. She's going to try to manipulate you or record you or, I don't know, but nothing good comes from meeting your ex-wife alone after you just exposed her family's crimes. She sounded, Adrian paused, trying to find the right word. Desperate. Good. She should be desperate. Her father's facing criminal charges. Her brother just got fired. Her entire family's reputation is in shambles. She's probably terrified. Simone crossed her arms. And terrified people do stupid things. Which is exactly why I need to go. If there's any chance of ending this without more bloodshed, I have to try. Adrian, I know what you're going to say. I know it's a risk, but I have to do this. He stood up and grabbed his jacket. I'll be back in 2 hours. If I'm not, call David and tell him where I went. Simone looked like she wanted to argue more. Instead, she pulled out her phone. I'm tracking your location, and if anything feels wrong, you text me immediately. 1 word. Help. That's it. I'll call the police. That's a little dramatic. I don't care. Text me help if you need it. Adrian kissed her forehead. I'll be fine. You don't know that. No, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway. The drive to his old house felt surreal, like going back in time to a version of his life that didn't exist anymore. The gate was open when he pulled up. The lights were on inside. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal. Adrian parked and sat in the car for a moment, trying to prepare himself for whatever was about to happen. Then he got out and walked to the door. It opened before he could knock. Vivian stood in the doorway, and Adrian barely recognized her. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was in jeans and a sweater, not the designer clothes she usually favored. She looked tired, human. Thanks for coming, she said quietly. Adrian stepped inside. What do you want, Vivian? She closed the door and led him into the living room. There was a bottle of wine on the coffee table, 2 glasses already poured. She picked up one and drank half of it in one swallow. My father called me 3 hours ago, Vivian said. He told me what you did, the motion you filed, the evidence you released. She set down her glass. He wants me to fight back, to countersue, to do whatever it takes to destroy you. And what do you want? Vivian looked at him, and there was something raw in her expression. I want this to be over. Adrian wasn't expecting that. What? I'm tired, Adrian. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of pretending I care about this marriage, or this divorce, or any of it. She sat down on the couch, her shoulders sagging. My father, he spent my entire life controlling everything. Who I married, where I worked, what I wore, what I said. And I let him, because it was easier than fighting back. Vivian, I'm not looking for sympathy. I know I've been horrible to you. I know I hired that photographer. I know I let my father and Richard and everyone else turn this into a war. She looked up at him. But I didn't know about the espionage, I swear. I didn't know they were breaking into your files and stealing information. That was all my father. Adrian studied her face, trying to determine if she was telling the truth. Why should I believe you? Because I have nothing left to lose. Vivian laughed, but it sounded hollow. My reputation is destroyed. My family is facing criminal charges. The man I was supposed to marry for stability divorced me for his assistant. I'm a walking punchline. You're not a punchline. Aren't I? She picked up her wine glass again. Everyone's going to remember me as the woman who wasn't enough, who couldn't keep her husband, who got traded in for a younger model. That's not what happened. Isn't it? Vivian's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Tell me honestly, Adrian, did you ever love me? Even a little? The question hung in the air between them. Adrian could have lied, could have said something polite and kind and meaningless, but Vivian deserved more than that. No, he said quietly. I didn't. She nodded like she'd been expecting that answer. I didn't love you either, but I wanted to. I tried to. I thought if we just kept going through the motions, eventually it would turn into something real. She wiped at her eyes. It never did. No, it didn't. They sat in silence for a moment. 2 people who'd spent 5 years married to each other without ever really knowing each other at all. I'm going to drop the lawsuits, Vivian said, finally. Adrian looked up. What? All of them. The prenup violation, the asset claims, everything. She set down her glass and stood up. I'm going to tell my lawyers to withdraw the filings. And I'm going to make a public statement saying that the divorce was mutual and amicable and that I wish you well. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired of being my father's weapon. Vivian walked to the window and stared out at the darkening sky. And because you were right, about the marriage, about the pretending, about all of it. I don't want to spend the rest of my life fighting over something that was never real in the first place. Adrian stood up and walked over to stand beside her. What about your father? Let him fight his own battles. I'm done being part of this. She turned to look at him. I'm sorry. For everything. For hiring the photographer. For letting this get so out of control. For wasting 5 years of your life. You didn't waste them. We both made choices we thought made sense at the time. They were terrible choices. Yeah, they were. Adrian smiled slightly. But at least we figured it out eventually. Vivian smiled back, and for the first time since he'd known her, it looked genuine. Go be with her. The assistant, Simone. Her name is Simone. I know her name. Vivian's smile faded. I looked her up after the photos came out, read her resume, looked at her social media. She's smart, accomplished. Everything I pretended to be but never actually was. Vivian, I'm not jealous, not anymore. I'm just... She paused. I hope she makes you happy, really happy, the kind of happy we never could have been. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't screw it up. You already destroyed one marriage. Try to make this one work. Adrian left the house feeling lighter than he had in weeks. Not because the problems were solved. There were still legal battles ahead, still fallout from the espionage scandal, still 1,000 things that could go wrong. But because for the first time, he felt like he and Vivian had actually been honest with each other. He texted Simone as soon as he got in his car. It's over. She's dropping the lawsuits. 3 dots appeared. Then, are you serious? Yes. I'll explain when I see you. Where are you? Heading back to the office. Meet me there? Already here. Adrian drove back through the city, watching the lights come on as the sun set. Los Angeles at night always looked better than it did during the day. Less harsh, more forgiving. When he got back to his building, Simone was waiting in his office. She stood up as soon as he walked in. Tell me everything. So he did. The whole conversation with Vivian, the admission that she hadn't known about the espionage, the decision to drop the lawsuits and end the war. When he finished, Simone was quiet for a long moment. Do you believe her? She asked finally. I think so. She didn't have any reason to lie. Not anymore. What about Min-seok? He's not going to just let this go. No, he's not. Adrian pulled Simone close. But that's a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, I just want to be here. With you. Simone wrapped her arms around him. What happens now? I don't know, but whatever it is, we'll figure it out. Together? Together. They stood there for a long time, holding each other in the quiet of the empty office, and Adrian thought about all the different versions of his life he could have lived. The safe one where he stayed married and miserable. The easy one where he never took the risk. The careful one where he protected his reputation above everything else. He was glad he hadn't chosen any of those. This version, the messy, complicated, uncertain one, was harder. But it was real. And real, he was learning, was worth fighting for. But real had consequences Adrian hadn't fully anticipated. The next morning, he woke up to his phone ringing at 6 a.m. Not David this time. His CFO, Margaret Torres. We have a problem, she said without preamble. Adrian sat up, still groggy. What kind of problem? The kind where 3 of our biggest investors just pulled out, simultaneously, within an hour of each other. Her voice was tight. Adrian, someone is orchestrating this. Someone with enough influence to convince major players to walk away from profitable partnerships. He didn't need to ask who. Min-seok. That would be my guess. And it's not just the investors. 2 of our key suppliers just sent notices that they're terminating contracts. Our line of credit with Pacific Bank got frozen pending review. This is coordinated. Adrian got out of bed and walked to the window. The city looked the same as always, indifferent, sprawling, alive. But he felt the ground shifting beneath him. How bad is it? Bad enough that if we don't find replacement funding in the next 2 weeks, we're going to have serious cash flow problems. And if this continues, Margaret paused. If this continues, we might not survive it. Okay, call an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. I'll be there. Adrian, the board is going to ask questions, hard questions, about the divorce, about Simone, about whether you're too distracted to run this company. Let them ask. He hung up and stood there for a moment, letting the weight of it settle over him. Min-seok wasn't just threatening, he was following through, methodically dismantling Adrian's company piece by piece, using every connection he had to choke off funding and support. It was brilliant, brutal, exactly what Adrian should have expected. His phone buzzed with a text from Simone. You okay? I saw the investor news. He called her instead of texting back. How bad is it? She asked immediately. Bad. Min-seok is calling in favors, pulling strings, trying to strangle the company financially. Can he do that? He's doing it. The question is whether I can stop him. Simone was quiet for a moment. What do you need from me? That was the thing about her. She never asked if he was sure, never tried to talk him out of fighting. She just asked what he needed. I need you to help me figure out who we can still trust, who hasn't been compromised, who might be willing to stand with us even if it means standing against the Parks. I'm already on it. I'll have a list by noon. Simone, I know what you're going to say, that this isn't my job anymore, that I don't have to do this. Her voice was firm. But I'm doing it anyway, so save your breath. Adrian smiled despite everything. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We might be going down with this ship. Then at least we're going down together. That's the worst romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. I'm working on it. She laughed, and it sounded like light in the dark. I'll see you at the office. The board meeting was exactly as brutal as Adrian expected. 9 people sitting around a conference table, all of them looking at him like he was a problem that needed solving. James Park, Min-seok's nephew and a board member since the company went public, led the attack. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, James said, his voice dripping with condescension. You divorced your wife, started a very public relationship with your assistant, exposed alleged corporate espionage that implicated my family, and now you're surprised that investors are pulling out? I'm not surprised. I'm dealing with it. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're destroying this company to satisfy a midlife crisis. Adrian leaned forward. From where I'm sitting, it looks like your uncle is using his influence to sabotage a company he no longer has any claim to because he's angry that I refuse to keep playing his games. James's face reddened. My uncle built this company. Your uncle provided seed funding. I built this company, and I'm not going to let him tear it down just because I had the audacity to divorce his daughter. Gentlemen, Margaret's voice cut through the tension. Fighting about who built what isn't productive. What we need is a plan. Adrian, what are you proposing? Adrian pulled out a folder and slid copies across the table. I've identified 7 potential investors who have no ties to the Park family. 3 venture capital firms, 2 private equity groups, and 2 individual investors who've expressed interest in the past. I'm proposing we reach out to all of them immediately and offer a 10% stake in the company in exchange for the funding we need to stay solvent. 10%? James looked outraged. That's a massive dilution of our equity. Would you rather have a smaller slice of a surviving company or a larger slice of one that goes under? Adrian didn't blink. Because those are the options right now. The room was silent. Finally, Catherine Liu, one of the independent board members, spoke up. I think Adrian's plan makes sense. We need to act quickly before Min-seok can poison any more wells. I move that we approve outreach to these investors immediately. Seconded, said Robert Kim, another independent member. The vote passed. 7-2. Only James and his ally voted against it. After the meeting, Margaret pulled Adrian aside in the hallway. That was risky, she said. Everything's risky right now. True. She studied him. Can I ask you something personal? Depends on the question. Is she worth it? The assistant, Simone. Adrian met her eyes. Her name is Simone, and yes, she's worth it. She's... Margaret nodded slowly. Then I hope she knows how lucky she is, because you're about to lose everything for her. I'm not losing everything for her. I'm losing everything that didn't matter anyway. Adrian started walking toward the elevators. There's a difference. The next week was chaos. Adrian and his team reached out to every potential investor on the list, pitching the company, explaining the situation, trying to secure funding before the cash flow crisis became catastrophic. Some said no immediately. Others wanted to wait and see how things played out. A few expressed interest but needed time to do due diligence, time they didn't have. Meanwhile, the media storm continued. Every day brought new headlines, new speculation, new commentary on Adrian's personal life. Some publications painted him as a romantic hero, choosing love over convenience. Others called him irresponsible, reckless, a CEO whose personal drama was destroying shareholder value. Adrian stopped reading the coverage after the 3rd day. It didn't matter what they said. None of them knew the real story anyway. What mattered was keeping the company alive and figuring out how to build a life with Simone that wasn't defined by crisis. That part turned out to be harder than he expected. They tried to have dinner together one night at Simone's apartment. She cooked pasta. He brought wine. They ate at her small kitchen table and tried to have a normal conversation about normal things. It lasted maybe 15 minutes before Adrian's phone started ringing. An investor callback. Then a message from David about the criminal investigation into the parks. Then an email from Margaret about another supplier terminating their contract. You should take those, Simone said quietly. I'm having dinner with you. Adrian, the company is falling apart. I need to be here. He set his phone face down on the table. I need to prove that I can still do this, that I can still have a life outside of work. But you can't. Simone's voice was gentle but honest. Not right now. Not in the middle of this. And that's okay. I understand. I don't want you to just understand. Adrian stopped, frustrated. I want to be the kind of person who can show up, who can be present, who doesn't always have to choose between his company and the person he loves. Then let me help you. Simone reached across the table and took his hand. Stop trying to protect me from this. Stop trying to keep me separate from the chaos. Let me be part of it. Let me carry some of the weight. You already are. No, I'm not. You're still treating me like someone who needs to be shielded from the hard parts, like I'm this fragile thing that might break if you let me see how bad it really is. She squeezed his hand. I left that job, Adrian. I left that role. I'm not your assistant anymore. I'm your partner. So let me be one. Adrian looked at her, at the fierce determination in her eyes, and felt something shift. Okay. Okay? Okay. Starting now, we do this together. All of it. The investor calls, the board meetings, the strategy sessions. You're not separate from my work anymore. You're part of it. Simone smiled. Good. Then answer your phone and put it on speaker so I can hear. They spent the rest of the night working together. Simone pulled up her laptop and started researching potential investors while Adrian fielded calls. She asked questions, offered suggestions, challenged his assumptions when they didn't make sense. And for the first time in weeks, Adrian felt like he wasn't drowning alone. By midnight, they had a new list of prospects and a revised pitch strategy. By 1 a.m., they'd scheduled 3 meetings for the following day. By 2, they were both exhausted and collapsed on Simone's couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. We're going to survive this, Simone said quietly. How do you know? Because we're too stubborn to fail. Adrian laughed. That's not a business strategy. It's worked so far. She fell asleep a few minutes later, but Adrian stayed awake, staring at the ceiling and thinking about all the different ways this could still fall apart. The investors could say no. Min-seok could escalate his attacks. The company could collapse despite their best efforts. But for the first time, he wasn't facing those possibilities alone. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. 10 days after the board meeting, Adrian was in his office when his assistant, a new hire named Jennifer, who'd replaced Simone in title but could never replace her in practice, knocked on his door. There's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. Who is it? He said his name is Min-seok Park. Adrian felt his chest tighten. Send him in. Min-seok walked into the office like he owned it, like he'd never been anything other than welcome there. He was carrying a leather portfolio under one arm, and his expression was unreadable. Adrian. He sat down without being invited. We need to talk. I think we've said everything we need to say. Clearly we haven't, or I wouldn't be here. Min-seok set the portfolio on the desk between them. I've been watching you these past 2 weeks, watching you scramble for funding, watching you fight to keep your company alive, watching you refuse to give up even when any sane person would have quit. And it reminded me of something. Min-seok leaned back in his chair. When I first met you, you were nobody. A kid with big ideas and no resources, no connections, no money, nothing but ambition and refusal to accept that the world owed you nothing. He paused. I backed you because I saw that hunger, that drive. And I thought, maybe this one will be different. Maybe this one won't become soft. I'm not soft. No, you're not. Min-seok smiled slightly. You're stubborn, foolish, willing to destroy everything for a principle, but not soft. Adrian waited. There was more coming. I came here to make you an offer, Min-seok said. The investors I convinced to pull out, I can bring them back. The suppliers I pressured, I can reverse it. The credit line I had frozen, I can unfreeze it. I can undo everything I've done to hurt your company. In exchange for what? In exchange for nothing. Min-seok opened the portfolio and pulled out a document. This is a signed agreement releasing you from any and all obligations to my family. No more interference, no more manipulation, no more attempts to control your business or your life." Adrian stared at the document like it might be a trap. "Why would you do this?" "Because I was wrong." The admission seemed to cost Min Seok something. "About you, about Vivian, about what I thought this marriage should be." He pushed the document across the desk. "I built an empire by controlling everything and everyone around me, and it worked for a long time. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that people aren't chess pieces. They're not assets to be managed." "What changed?" "Vivian came to see me 3 days ago. She told me she was done. Done with the lawsuits, done with the fighting, done with being the person I wanted her to be instead of the person she actually was." Min Seok's expression was complicated. "And I realized I've been so focused on protecting my family's reputation that I destroyed my daughter's chance at happiness, just like I destroyed yours." Adrian didn't know what to say. "I'm not apologizing," Min Seok continued. "I don't apologize. But I'm acknowledging that forcing you into a marriage you didn't want, for the sake of appearances, was a mistake. And continuing to punish you for ending that marriage is pointless." He stood up and walked toward the door. Then he stopped and looked back. "That woman, Simone. The one you're willing to lose everything for." Min Seok's eyes were sharp. "Don't make the same mistakes I did. Don't turn love into a transaction. Don't let ambition poison what you have. And don't wait until it's too late to choose what actually matters." Then he left. Adrian sat alone in his office, staring at the document on his desk, trying to process what had just happened. Min Seok Park, the man who'd controlled his life for 5 years, who'd orchestrated his marriage, who tried to destroy him, had just set him free. He picked up his phone and called Simone. "Are you sitting down?" he asked when she answered. "Should I be?" "Probably. Min Seok was just here. He's calling off the attacks, bringing back the investors, releasing me from any obligations to his family." Silence on the other end. Then, "Are you serious?" "I'm looking at the signed agreement right now." "Why would he do that?" "I think—" Adrian paused, trying to find the right words. "I think he looked at what he was doing and realized it was destroying more than just me. It was destroying his relationship with his daughter, his family's future, everything he thought he was protecting." "So what now?" "Now we rebuild, we secure funding, we stabilize the company, we figure out what comes next. Together?" "Together." Adrian heard her breathe out slowly. "Can I tell you something?" "Anything." "I've been terrified. Not of losing the company, not of the public scrutiny, not of any of that." Her voice was soft. "I've been terrified that you'd wake up one day and realize I wasn't worth it, that you'd regret everything you gave up and resent me for it." "Simone, let me finish." "I've been terrified of that, but I've also been more myself these past few weeks than I've been in years. Because you let me be real. Messy. Imperfect. You didn't ask me to be anything other than who I actually am." She paused. "And I need you to know, whatever happens next, whatever we build together, I'm not going anywhere. Even when it's hard. Even when I'm scared, I'm staying." Adrian felt his throat tighten. "I'm not good at this. At the relationship stuff. At being vulnerable. At any of it. I know. I'm going to mess up a lot. I'm going to work too much and forget important things and probably say the wrong thing at the wrong time. I know that too." "And you're still staying?" "I'm still staying." He could hear the smile in her voice. "Because you're worth fighting for, even when you don't think you are." That night, Adrian did something he hadn't done in years. He left the office at 6 p.m. Not because there wasn't more work to do. There was always more work. But because Simone had asked him to meet her somewhere, and for once, he was choosing to show up. She'd texted him an address in Echo Park. No explanation, just the location and a time. When Adrian pulled up, he found himself at a small community garden tucked between 2 buildings. It was the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. A pocket of green in the middle of concrete and traffic. Simone was waiting at the entrance, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, her hair pulled back. She looked younger somehow, lighter. "What is this?" Adrian asked. "I volunteer here on weekends, or I used to before I started working for you, and didn't have time for anything else." She led him through the gate into the garden. "I thought you should see it." The space was bigger than it looked from the street. Raised beds full of vegetables and herbs, fruit trees along the back fence, a small greenhouse in one corner. People were scattered throughout, older women tending tomato plants, kids watering seedlings, a couple of teenagers pulling weeds. Adrian searched for the right word. Unexpected. I started coming here when I first moved to LA, when everything felt overwhelming and I didn't know anyone. It was quiet, peaceful, a place where I could just exist without having to perform or prove anything. She knelt down next to a bed of lettuce and started checking for weeds. I stopped coming when I took the job at your company. I told myself I didn't have time, but really, I think I just forgot that I needed this. Adrian knelt down beside her. You're bringing me to your secret garden. It's not secret. It's just mine. The one part of my life that was never about work or ambition or building something. It was just about growing things, watching them change, being patient. She pulled out a weed and tossed it aside. I wanted you to see it because I think you need to remember that too. That not everything has to be about building empires or winning battles. Sometimes things just grow because you take care of them. They worked in silence for a while, pulling weeds, watering plants, moving slowly through the rows. Adrian had never gardened before. He didn't know what half the plants were, but there was something meditative about it, something grounding. An older woman working nearby looked over at them and smiled. New volunteer? Something like that, Simone said. Well, you picked a good one to bring. The cilantro's been looking sad all week. Needs someone with a gentle touch. Adrian looked down at his hands that signed contracts worth millions, that closed deals, that built buildings, and felt absurdly out of place. But Simone just handed him a watering can. Start with that one. Not too much. Just enough. He did what she said. Slow, careful, watching the water soak into the soil. See, Simone said, you're already getting it. When they finished, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. They sat on a bench near the back of the garden, dirt under their fingernails, the smell of herbs in the air. I want to make a deal with you, Simone said. What kind of deal? Once a week, we do this. We come here, or we go somewhere that has nothing to do with work, and we just exist. No phones, no emails, no crisis management, just us. Simone, I'm serious. If we're going to build something together, really build it, we need to remember what it's for, why we're doing it. She turned to face him. We're not doing it to win or to prove something or to build a bigger empire. We're doing it so we can have a life, a real one. And that requires protecting time for things that matter more than work. Adrian thought about all the years he'd spent prioritizing deals over dinner, meetings over relationships, success over everything else. You're right. I know I'm right. One condition. Simone raised an eyebrow. What? You get to pick the place. But I get to decide when we leave work. No more working until midnight unless it's actually an emergency. Deal. They shook on it, both of them laughing at the formality of it. 6 months later, Adrian stood in his office and looked out at the city that had almost killed him and somehow saved him at the same time. The company had survived, more than survived. The new investors had come through. The suppliers had renewed their contracts. Pacific Bank had unfrozen the credit line. Adrian had restructured the board, removing James and bringing in people he actually trusted. It wasn't the same company it had been. It was smaller in some ways, leaner. But it was his. Really his this time. Not built on someone else's foundation, not dependent on someone else's approval, just his. Behind him, the office door opened. You ready? Simone asked. Adrian turned. She was wearing a dress he'd never seen before. Simple, elegant, the kind of thing she'd wear to a celebration that actually mattered. Ready. They took the elevator down together. Not to a board meeting or an investor presentation. To the lobby, where a small group had gathered. David Chen, Margaret Torres, Catherine Liu, and Robert Kim from the board. A few other people who'd stood by Adrian when everyone else was running. They were celebrating the end of the lawsuits, the finalization of the divorce, the closure of the criminal investigation into the parks. Charges had been filed against Marcus Chen and a few others, but Min-suk himself had somehow escaped prosecution, probably through connections Adrian didn't want to think about. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt like relief, like finally being able to exhale after holding your breath for months. They went to a restaurant downtown. Nothing fancy, just good food and good company. People told stories, laughed, raised glasses to survival and stubbornness and not giving up, even when giving up seemed reasonable. At one point, David pulled Adrian aside. "You know what the craziest part of all this is?" the lawyer said. "What?" "A year ago, if you'd asked me if you were happy, I would have said yes. You had everything. Money, power, respect, everything a person could want." David shook his head. "But you weren't happy. Not even close. And I don't think any of us realized it until you burned it all down." "I didn't burn it all down, just the parts that were suffocating me." "Same thing," David smiled. "But look at you now. You lost half your investors, you're in debt up to your eyeballs, your reputation will never be what it was, and you're happier than I've ever seen you." Adrian looked across the room to where Simone was talking with Margaret, both of them laughing about something. "Yeah, I am." "That woman better be worth it." "She is, but that's not the point." Adrian turned back to David. "The point is that I'm worth it. My actual life, not the performance of one. That's what I was missing." Later that night, after everyone else had gone home, Adrian and Simone walked back to his building. Not to work, just because they could, because the night was warm and the city was alive and they had nowhere else they needed to be. "Can I tell you something?" Simone said as they walked. "Always. When I first took that job, when I became your assistant, I thought if I worked hard enough, if I was good enough, if I proved myself, then maybe I'd matter. Maybe I'd be important." She slowed her pace, looking up at the buildings around them. "And I did matter, in a way. But I was always in service to something else. Your schedule, your meetings, your life. And now I'm building my own life. One that includes you but isn't defined by you." She looked at him. "And that's the difference. That's why this works. Because neither of us is trying to complete the other person or fix them or save them. We're just choosing to exist in the same space and see what we can build together." Adrian stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "I love you." Simone blinked. "What?" "I love you. I should have said it before now. I should have said it 100 times, but I'm saying it now." He took her hands. "I love you. Not because you make my life easier or because you fit into some plan. I love you because you make me want to be honest, because you make me want to try, because you refuse to let me hide behind work or money or any of the other things I used to think mattered." Simone's eyes were bright. "I love you too. Even though you're terrible at romantic gestures and you work too much and you still don't know how to properly water cilantro." Adrian laughed. "I'm working on the cilantro thing." "I know you are." He kissed her there on the sidewalk, with people walking past and cars honking and the city humming around them. It wasn't private or perfect or particularly romantic by anyone else's standards, but it was real. And real, Adrian had learned, was the only thing worth having. 3 years later, Adrian sold the company. Not because it was failing, it was doing better than ever, but because he'd realized something fundamental. He'd built it to prove he could. Not because he actually wanted to run a real estate empire for the rest of his life. What he wanted was smaller, more focused, more his. He started a consulting firm with Simone, just the two of them at first, then a few carefully chosen people who shared their vision. They worked with businesses that were struggling, helping them restructure and find solid ground. It was satisfying in a way the empire building never had been. More human scale. More about the work than the image. They bought a house together. Not in the hills where Adrian's old estate had been, but in Silver Lake, not far from Simone's old apartment. It had a yard, enough space for a garden, a front porch where they could sit and watch the neighborhood move around them. Simone still volunteered at the community garden on weekends. Adrian still worked too much, but less than he used to. They fought sometimes about stupid things, whose turn it was to do dishes, whether to get a dog, how to spend holidays. Normal couple stuff that felt revelatory precisely because it was so ordinary. Vivian got remarried 2 years after the divorce, to an artist, of all people. Someone completely different from Adrian. Someone who painted and traveled and didn't care about reputation or appearances. Adrian saw the announcement and felt genuinely happy for her. Min-seok Park retired and moved to South Korea. The criminal investigation had damaged his reputation enough that he'd decided to spend his remaining years somewhere quieter, away from the empire he'd built. Adrian heard through the grapevine that he spent most of his time with his grandchildren now, trying to be the kind of grandfather he'd never been as a father. Richard and Marcus both served short prison sentences for corporate espionage. When they got out, they left Los Angeles entirely. Adrian never heard from either of them again. On a Thursday evening, 5 years after that night in his empty office, Adrian came home to find Simone in the backyard, kneeling in the dirt, planting something he didn't recognize. "What's that?" he asked. "Lavender. I thought it might do well in this corner." She sat back on her heels and looked up at him. "How was your day?" "Good. We closed the Morrison deal. They're going to be fine. Better than fine, actually." "That's great." She stood up and brushed dirt off her knees. "I made dinner. It's in the oven. Chicken, vegetables, nothing fancy." "Perfect." They went inside together, and Adrian watched as Simone washed her hands at the kitchen sink, humming something under her breath. The evening light came through the window, catching her hair, making the whole scene feel suspended somehow, like a moment he wanted to remember exactly as it was. "What?" Simone asked, noticing him staring. "Nothing. Just this. All of this." She smiled. "Careful. You're getting sentimental in your old age." "I'm 46. Exactly. Old." He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not letting me waste my life. For pushing back when I needed it. For staying even when it would have been easier to leave." Simone turned in his arms. "You know what I realized?" "What?" "Everyone thinks the love story is about choosing each other, about some big romantic gesture or sacrifice, but that's not really it." She put her hands on his chest. "The love story is about what comes after the choice is made, after the dust settles. It's about the Thursday nights and the arguments about dishes and the way we figure out how to build something together that neither of us could have built alone." "That's not very romantic." "It's the only kind of romantic that lasts." Adrian kissed her forehead. "You're probably right." "I'm definitely right." They ate dinner at the table in the backyard as the sun went down, talking about nothing important and everything important at the same time. Plans for the weekend. A client issue that needed solving. Whether they should finally get that dog. Normal conversation, normal life. The kind Adrian had spent years thinking he didn't want or need or deserve. The kind he'd almost lost before he realized it was the only thing worth having. Later, lying in bed with Simone asleep beside him, Adrian thought about all the different versions of himself he'd been. The ambitious kid who built an empire from nothing. The miserable husband trapped in a performance. The CEO willing to lose everything for something real. The man who finally learned that success meant nothing if it cost you your life. He didn't regret any of it, not even the hard parts, not even the years he'd wasted pretending, because all of it had led him here. To this house. This life. This woman sleeping next to him who'd refused to let him settle for less than honest. Outside, the city hummed its eternal song. Cars passing, sirens in the distance, people living their lives in a million different ways. But Adrian wasn't paying attention to any of that. He was too busy being grateful for the one thing he'd finally learned after 4 decades of getting it wrong. The hardest thing in the world isn't building empires or winning wars or proving you're better than everyone else. The hardest thing is being brave enough to want what you actually want, not what you think you're supposed to want. And the second hardest thing is doing the work to keep it once you find it. Adrian had spent most of his life chasing the wrong things for the right reasons. Power, because he thought it meant freedom. Success, because he thought it meant respect. Marriage, because he thought it meant stability. But none of those things had given him what he was actually looking for. What he was looking for had been standing in his office at midnight, crying over his coat, waiting for him to finally see her. Waiting for him to see himself. And now that he'd burned down the old life and built something new from the ashes, Adrian understood something he wished he'd known decades earlier. You can't love another person until you're brave enough to be honest about who you actually are. Not who you think you should be, not who other people expect you to be, just who you are with all your flaws and fears and imperfections. That was the real work. Not building empires, not winning battles. Just being human enough to admit you don't have all the answers, that you're scared sometimes, that you need help, that you need someone. Simone stirred beside him, mumbling something in her sleep. Adrian pulled her closer and closed his eyes. Tomorrow they'd wake up and go back to work. There would be problems to solve and decisions to make and 100 small tasks that made up a life. They'd probably argue about something stupid, laugh about something ridiculous, make plans they may or may not keep, but they'd do it together. And that made all the difference. Because at the end of everything, after the lawsuits and the headlines and the corporate wars, what Adrian had learned was simple. The only thing you really own is your life. Not your reputation, not your empire, not the image you project to the world. Just your life. The way you spend your days. The people you choose to love. The small moments you remember when everything else fades. And if you're lucky enough to find someone who makes you want to live that life honestly, who sees you completely and stays anyway, who builds something with you instead of just existing in your orbit, then you hold on to them. You fight for them. You show up for them, even when it's hard, even when you're tired, even when the world is telling you you're making a mistake. Because in the end, the only thing that matters is whether you were brave enough to choose what was real over what was easy. Adrian had made his choice, and every single day he chose it again. That was the love story, not the moment they first kissed, or the dramatic confrontation, or the happy ending. The love story was the choosing, every day, over and over. The love story was the life they built together, one small decision at a time, in a house with a garden and a front porch and no pretense of perfection. The love story was this: two imperfect people who refused to hide anymore, who learned to be honest instead of impressive, who chose each other not once but 1,000 times. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.